So we thought we'd do a panel that kind of gets into the PSOB expansion for cancer, which probably is the most impactful piece of legislation the IAFF's ever done when you think about the scope, the amount of families that this is going to impact, the actual benefit itself. It's a very, it's a good benefit. One none of us want, right? But it's a great benefit. And it was something that for us was always kind of pie in the sky. So with us today to kind of explain how we got here is Adam Elson, who was the right-hand person for Senator Amy Klobuchar, who sponsored the legislation. We're going to hear from Senator Klobuchar in a little while. Adam was in the sausage making of the entire process. We also have Scott Vadnice, president of the Minnesota State Association, who's going to give us some lens on how the energy kind of came to fruition out of this. We also have our Director of Legislative Affairs, Evan Davis, who was the guy behind the scenes shepherding this all throughout the halls of Congress. And Kevin O'Connor, who's for pushing 30 years has been the top lobbyist for the IAFF on Capitol Hill, and prior to that was president of the Maryland Professional Firefighters and the Baltimore County Firefighters. So all in, he's probably close to about 40 years of lobbying for IAFF issues on Capitol Hill. So we'll get started. We'll start with Kevin, who has that kind of historical perspective of the PSOB benefit itself and what a big hill it was to climb to get to where we are. So Kevin, give us a little history.
Thanks, GP. First, it's already been said, this was one of the greatest victories in the history of the IAFF. But it's important to understand it's a bit of an evolution. We're celebrating our 50th year of the passage of PSOB, which was done in 1976. And when it was first done, it was only for traumatic type injuries. It was a $50,000 benefit that was provided for smoke inhalation, burns, vehicular accidents, et cetera. Even then, we understood that occupational disease was a problem, but everything in Washington is the art of the possible. So under the leadership of another Mass guy, Marty Pierce, we were able to pass this legislation with the limitations that it had. Prior to that, the IAFF started doing research on cancer and heart disease with our Redmond symposiums in the early 70s. We understood that occupational disease was going to take more lives ultimately than traumatic injuries. But frankly, we just didn't have the juice to be able to move it on the national level. So what happened originally was we started presumptions at the state level. And originally they were heart and lung presumptions. Well, about 25 years after the original passage of PSOB, in the year 2004, we passed what was called the Hometown Heroes Act. And what this did is this expanded PSOB to include heart attacks and strokes. And much like the cancer legislation, you know, it was a struggle. But the advantage we had back then is the country was still very respectful of our profession because of 9/11. So it made it a little bit easier. We were also able to get legislation for our New York folks that took into account 9/11 type diseases. So we had a little bit of a boost on PSOB that we took it away from just the traumatic injuries. Fast forward, all of our research through our safety and health division, our medical division, et cetera, was really pointing to cancer. And I won't elaborate because you guys know it as much as I do, that cancer right now kills more firefighters. The statistics are there. You go to Colorado Springs, you see the names etched on the wall, mostly are cancer deaths. Nothing ever happens in DC unless there's a lot of hard work, a little bit of luck, and science. So much like the heart-lung presumption stuff, we started doing cancer on a state-by-state basis and throughout Canada as well. And we had a great deal of success. Well, you know, it's often been said that what happens in state capitals is a laboratory of democracy, and we decided to try to bring it to Washington, D.C., but again, we needed the science. So we got a hell of a boost when the World Health Organization listed the occupation of firefighting as a level 1 carcinogen. So we were up there with all the methylethyl chemicals that they say, you know, lead to cancer. Just their profession has been recognized for that. So that was a nice boost and a nice scientific fact that we were able to use. But we still actually had to pass legislation. The next building block in the program was getting federal presumption for our federal firefighters. We had it in the states, but we didn't have it for our federal firefighters. And that was a long-time goal of the 16th District. And under General President Kelly's leadership, we were able to pass that legislation 2 Congresses ago. What Congress did is they listed 20 cancers. And they said if federal firefighters got any of these cancers, it would be presumed to be in the line of duty. So using that as a building block, we started the legislation on our most recent victory, bringing PSOB to firefighters. We also had an intermediate step. I should have said you have to look at PSOB as an evolution. Also 2 Congresses ago, we expanded it to include suicides under certain parameters. So this evolutionary process started 50 years ago. Started as a one-time benefit of $50,000. It's grown. Evan will talk about that. But nothing just happens. This has been something that we've aspired to for a very long time. And, you know, over a period of 5 decades, we've now finally brought it up to speed. So everybody, congratulations, because it's been a group effort for people past, present, and hopefully future will take it even further.
It really is a decades-long vision that came to a reality. But like with anything in trying to move legislation, there's plenty of good ideas floating around out there, but making it a law is a little heavier lift. And in this particular case, Kevin laid it out perfectly about the machinations of how we actually got to a place where we had that scientific argument. But you really need some emotion. You need energy. And to talk a little bit about what I would consider to be the catalyst of energy that we needed, I'd like to turn to Scotty, kind of give us an idea of how this all came about and where it grew out of Minnesota.
Perfect. Thanks, GP Kelly. In February of 2020, as the video said, Megan Piter's dad was diagnosed with cancer, occupational cancer. He died about 6 months later. And at the time, Local 21 President Mike Smith realized that there was really nothing to do for the family, and he started pushing it at the State House. And for the state of Minnesota, for the first time ever, occupational cancer was recognized as a state PSOB. The one and only to this day was Mike Piter. At that time, he talked with DVP Emeritus Tom Thornburg, and with the help of Julie, started reaching out to senators, and Senator Klobuchar heard about this and grabbed it. And through the perseverance of Local 21 and really Julie Piter, she took this on and fought and fought and fought for to get this passed and did the right stuff.
So Julie was really, you know, what I consider to be like the spark that got this rolling. You know, we have always had this as a vision. I think it's something that Kevin pointed out. There was a lot of more technical rationale between building up to a place where we had a credible argument. But it was Julie Piter that provided the spark that really lit what today is probably like we said, most impactful benefit that the IAFF's ever accomplished. But as we all know in this room, because you've all tried to pass an ordinance at the city council or legislation at your state house, or you've been across the street trying to lobby, the best laid plans aren't often get to their seated goal, right? But that's where Adam comes in. And when Senator Klobuchar took the reins of this issue, filed legislation, Adam became the workhorse to kind of push it through the Senate and make it a reality. So, Adam, tell us a little bit about when you learned about this and what happened from there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. I learned about this through my boss, Senator Klobuchar. She heard Julie's story, and for those of you who haven't met Julie by now, she's a force of nature. She's absolutely incredible, and so getting the human side of the cancer issue, how it affects the fire service, putting a personal face to it really helped kind of, as you said, give the spark to get this whole thing going.
Yeah. So that went to the Judiciary Committee, or?
That's right, yeah.
So who are the decision makers on the Judiciary Committee that kind of we had to sell the idea and to get it moving?
Absolutely, that's a good question. Like any committee on Capitol Hill, you need to get through the chairman and the ranking member. So last year during the Biden admin, or I guess last Congress during the Biden admin, at the time the chair was Senator Durbin from Illinois, and the ranking member was Senator Grassley from Iowa. This year it's flipped, and so Senator Grassley is now the chairman, and when we were trying to get this passed into law, we really needed to get his support, and the IAFF was fantastic, and as you saw in the video, making the case, going to offices, putting a human story to why this is an important issue.
Yeah, it was a major effort, and there's a lot of, success has 1,000 fathers, right? There were a lot of people that were involved in this, and kudos to everybody, starting with all of our IAFF members that helped to push this with their members of Congress, their senators from their respective states, and all the other partners in the fire service that helped to push this along. It's unique to me in this day and age where there's such polarized politics in Washington, D.C., that when time came to we had the advent of trying to put this into the National Defense Authorization Act, which again triggered another committee to have oversight over it. And we had, the leadership on those committees help us as well, right?
But it helps that every senator, every member of Congress has a firehouse in their district. They care about these issues. Everybody knows when you call for help, the firefighters will show up. And, I think it's not a partisan issue. People want to help firefighters because firefighters help everybody else.
I know Senator Reid, who is ranking member on
the Armed Services, that's right,
was very helpful in getting it into the NDAA.
Yeah.
And were there any other senators you think that we as the beneficiaries of their work, we should be thanking?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think first and foremost, Chairman Grassley of the Judiciary Committee and Ranking Member Durbin, they really helped spark this and keep this moving along. You alluded to Ranking Member Reid. He did, yeoman's work pulling this through, and then Leader Schumer and Leader Thune helping it get all the way through into final passage.
Yeah, very good. Uniquely in this polarizing environment, the actual motion had to be a standalone motion to put the Honoring Our Fallen Heroes Act into the National Defense Authorization Act as our vehicle to passage. Actually passed in the U.S. Senate unanimously, which in this day and age, to have anything passed unanimously is pretty impressive.
And it speaks to the importance of firefighters. It speaks to the fact that everybody, has a firehouse in their state and want to do good work by you.
Well, that speaks to the work that our members do every day and the oath we took. And when you think about a unanimous vote in the U.S. Senate, and that leads us to the House of Representatives, which presented its own challenges to us in trying to get this passed, that's where Evan Davis was our behind-the-scenes quarterback, handling every little stumbling block, obstacle, making sure that our friends stayed with us, and that those that may not have seen things the way we see it, we found a path through or around them. So Evan, why don't you give us a little history of how it took shape from the Senate over into the House and eventually to the President's desk?
Yeah, thank you so much, GP. When we came out of the Senate on that unanimous vote, it really set us in a good place to march forward in the House. We had a lot of great friends on both sides of the aisle in the House of Representatives that certainly helped us get close to that finish line, but we did encounter some challenges. One of our biggest challenges that we had to overcome was the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, which kind of sounds a little funky. The Judiciary Committee has jurisdiction over the PSOB program because it's administered by the Department of Justice. But the chairman, a gentleman named Jim Jordan from Ohio, a real fiscal conservative, big budget hawk, had some skepticism with our bill. I think everyone here understands the intrinsic connections between firefighting and cancer. Certainly everyone here, I'm sure, has either lost a loved one or colleague or a friend to cancer or knows someone going through cancer. And so it's something that comes top of mind for us. And there's lots of members of Congress who get it. We've got 2 IAFF members in Congress now. God willing, Bob will make it number 3 for us. But those champions can only get us so far. When the chairman has concerns about a bill, it's a huge hurdle. And so one of the first challenges we had to get past was Chairman Jordan's staff themselves. They know where the chairman stands. They know that even a good, righteous issue like this one, the dollars and cents at the end of the day is going to dictate where he lands on the issue. FirePack was incredibly helpful there. We had met with the staffer a number of times, and she was pretty dug in that this was not going to move forward unless we had an exact dollar-for-dollar pay for it to offset the cost to the government. FirePack, I hope everyone here in this room contributes and actively participates in FirePack, helped us get around that staffer. A lot of times you just have to jump over the staffer, go directly to the member, and so FirePack let us do that. We met with Chairman Jordan directly, and the General President did a phenomenal job making the case to Chairman Jordan about why, yes, in the larger scheme, certainly dollars and cents do matter in the federal budget, but there are some things we just have to spend our money on, whether it's the City Council, State House, Congress. Things like taking care of our first responders is one of those issues that shouldn't be a dollars and cents issue at the end of the day. And we made some headway with Chairman Jordan, but frankly, we ran into some continued challenges from him, as well as the House Freedom Caucus. The Freedom Caucus, for those who don't know it too well, is a group of about 40 or so, likewise very conservative, very fiscally conscious members of Congress who shared some of those concerns. And Chairman Jordan had concerns about how he could take this bill back to the Freedom Caucus and not get shot down. And that's where we turned to the White House. President Trump and his legislative affairs team had strongly come out in support of our Honor Act, just as they did on the WEP GPO bill, and this one was no different. The President and his legislative affairs team sent the message clear to Chairman Jordan, to the members of the Freedom Caucus, to Speaker Johnson, Republicans on both sides of the Capitol building, that this is a priority that has to get done. That dollars and cents, we can fight over those, till the cows come home, but this is something, taking care of first responders and their families, that just has to make it into that final product. And candidly, through the help of President Trump, through the help of the White House, we were able to get past Chairman Jordan's objections. We were able to placate the Freedom Caucus and have them realize that this is something that will just candidly put those dollars and cents concerns to the side and landed us in the National Defense Authorization Act. It was helpful. The chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Mike Rogers from Alabama, his father, actually a federal firefighter as well, so he got it. Once we got past Chairman Jordan, had a sympathetic ear with him, and certainly Speaker Johnson has a very personal connection to this union specifically. He's a huge champion of ours, and he helped us get through, and fortunately President Trump signed it into law almost immediately on December 18th. And so we're excited to now work with the Department of Justice. We've already met with them at a high level to talk about implementation, how do we roll this out, and we're looking forward to getting this moving forward.
So to be even more specific, we had good support in the House. We had commitment from the Speaker that he was supportive of it. We ran into that stumbling block almost at the last minute, where all of a sudden we had to come up with a $250 million pay for, which previous to that we were told that it would not require a pay for because it was mandatory spending, which is kind of appropriation speak down here. But all of a sudden, with hours starting to click down, we're less than a week out from, I think, the bill being voted. We had to come up with $250 million. And then as we started kind of conjuring up ideas on where in the federal budget we might be able to sell reappropriating some money over, we realized that it actually has to come out of the judiciary's budget line. So that kind of narrowed us down very specifically. And it was actually the White House that actually found the $250 million through the asset forfeiture appropriation line. So we kind of rescued it at the last minute there.
Yeah, and those pay-fors are some of the hardest items to find. And as much as we think there's slush funds here and there, there's interest groups everywhere throughout the United States. Every ox has someone trying to protect it from being gored, and it really was a work of art for the White House to find that fund, to earmark it for firefighters, for first responders, and make sure we got it across the finish line.
Evan, let's talk a little bit about the benefit itself, like the parameters that have been set on it and how our leadership should access it through us.
Sure. So the public safety officers' benefits, first and foremost, as the name implies, is reserved for public safety officers. So vast majority of everyone here in this room would qualify by the extent of working for a governmental fire department at the local, state, or federal level. Within the bill itself, once you meet that requirement of being a covered public safety officer, you have to demonstrate certain longevity on the job. And so the bill parameters for the cancer coverage is set for the diagnosis must come at least 5 years after beginning service as a firefighter. And then on the back end, you can be diagnosed up to 15 years after your retirement and still be considered eligible for the benefit. And so that's kind of box 2. Box 3 is having a covered form of cancer. And so the bill itself delineates about 20 forms of cancer that are covered very clearly, explicitly in the bill text. We've actually got a copy of the bill just outside in the exhibition area. Welcome to take a look at. Lists those forms of cancer. And we were able to include an additional item on that list as any cancer recognized by the World Trade Center Health Program would be cross-applied for even non-9/11 first responders. And so we're still working with the Department of Justice to define exactly what constitutes those World Trade Center health-connected cancers that will be cross-applied. We're optimistic it's a pretty broad spectrum of types of cancer. We're working on that one. And then bucket number 4 is the applicability date. And so the law itself took this cancer coverage backwards to deaths occurring since January 1 of 2020. So as long as, again, you meet those other criteria of being a covered public safety officer, 5 to 15 years on the job for diagnosis, covered form of cancer, if that death occurs after January 1 of 2020, the individual will be covered. And certainly prospectively moving forward, that same criteria will apply as well. We're certainly, as I mentioned, working with the Department of Justice now to fine-tune exactly all the application specifics, but encourage local leaders to think about the cases that you have in your locals who might qualify for that, and at least start gathering documents, diagnosis documents, death records, marriage records, so PSOB, when you do go to file the claim, you'll have a leg to stand on and start that process.
So at the local level, especially if you're in a local with some size to it, you're going to want to designate a person or a committee to start doing that homework. I can tell you, in the world that I come from, we have a 5-year look back for cancer post-retirement. So we wouldn't really even be tracking our members who are eligible for this benefit, their families would be eligible for this benefit, who are diagnosed past their 5th year post-retirement. So there's going to be a lot of homework to get done to look at the necrology of every local, who's died since January 1st, 2020, what did they die of, and probably even more tricky is when was their diagnosis? How far post-retirement were they diagnosed to see if they're eligible for the benefit? So there's a lot of homework that's got to get done at the local level. So my recommendation to you, if you're running a local, if you're a president, designate somebody as your PSOB coordinator for, hate to say, your actives are pretty easy. It's going to be your retirees that's going to be a difficult chase. But we also have a time frame that these retroactive PSOB claims have to be filed by. And I believe is it January 28th?
3 years from the date of passage. So December 18, 2028 is when claims must be filed.
So December 18, 2028, and, we don't want to be talking to somebody at Christmas and realize that we missed them or they weren't aware of this benefit. So there's some homework to be done. And if you're in a big local, that's committee work. That should be a stood-up committee that has to really chase that down and try to reach out to families, chase down paperwork in order to make the claims. We do have, we're going to have district PSOB coordinators for your IAFF DVP. We'll assign somebody to be that first point of contact so you can kind of get coached up on what you should be looking for. And then we have 2 PSOB coordinators at the IAFF level that can help make sure the package is appropriate before we submit it to the Department of Justice. So there's a lot of homework to get done on this. We do have a clock running. There is time, but you can't sit on it. You got to get to work on it. So with that, Scotty, talk a little bit about a family. Talk a little bit about what the Pater family, what a difference this will make for those kids.
I think it's a huge difference. I know that it has benefits for college and things like that, but more importantly, it gives security to the family, financial security for all the time that we put in as firefighters. And it gives them that financial security to go and live their life without the firefighter, unfortunately. But to have that ability, to have them, to have that financial security means the world. And if they have younger kids, it gives them a path forward for an education and really supporting them so their family, the surviving spouse can take care of the family, has the freedom to take care of their family.
It's a big benefit. It's certainly going to help a lot of families that have endured terrible loss. Evan, can you talk a little bit about the Pell Grants, how they work?
Sure. So the PSOB benefit has two pieces. There's the one-time tax-exempt benefit that's paid, the survivorship benefit to the family. It's indexed to inflation. Currently today sits at about $461,000 and change. We'll see that increase again in October 1st relative to inflation. The Pell Grants are a really important part that is, as the General President mentioned and Scott mentioned, helps those families get their kids to college, and also the surviving spouse can frequently qualify for Pell Grants as well. And so the grants are based on, there's a separate funding formula that DOJ uses to figure out exactly how much money to award based on funds available, number of dependents, things like that. But generally we see it knocking out a significant chunk, if not all, of college tuition for those folks. Job training uses as well. If someone decides to go the skilled trades route rather than college, those grants can be used for that. And occasionally there is a look-back period as well. I'm optimistic for the families in that retroactive period. If they've got a child who's already graduated college, if they have a student loan balance, there may be an opportunity, if they're federally held student loans, to go backwards and forgive some of those loans.
So we'll be able to help when you have those unique situations. We have our PSOB coordinators that can help navigate that, some of the challenges that you may face there. But again, a lot of the work got to get done at the local level, and I encourage you, as you're a local president, to assign somebody to the task. With that, Adam, we want to thank you for all the work that you did, and we would be remiss if we didn't say you got anything else in there we can get out of you.
We'll talk in the green room.
All right, good. So we're also excited to hear from Senator Klobuchar, who's been a tremendous champion of ours. She'll be here in a few hours. She was the leader of this bill, and we're grateful for that. We also had great Carlos Jimenez, who was IAFF member of Congress from Miami, who was a Rescue 1 captain down in Miami, and now a member of Congress, helped to champion this through. We had a lot of help, so we appreciate if you go across the street. As important it is for us to get some support for our current priorities, we also want to say thank you for the support that we've gotten out of the members of Congress. So when you go over there, don't forget to say thank you. So with that, we'll be back here up on stage in a few minutes. So thank you. Thank you to the panel. Thank you.